Hollywood's golden age looked like a dream from the outside: dazzling premieres, luxury mansions, flashing cameras, and stars who seemed larger than life. But behind the glamour was a world filled with secret romances, emotional struggles, betrayal, and loneliness hidden beneath perfect smiles. Some of the most legendary actresses in cinema history lived fearless lives, breaking society's rules while the world watched their every move. Their beauty made them unforgettable, but their private lives made them mysterious. From forbidden affairs to heartbreaking tragedies, these women became symbols of desire, power, and rebellion in an era that tried to control them. Tonight, we uncover the untold stories behind the icons who defined old Hollywood and changed entertainment forever. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. Few women in Hollywood history have ever reached the level of fame, beauty, and mystery that Marilyn Monroe did. Even decades after her death, her name still represents glamour, desire, and the golden age of cinema itself. With her platinum blonde hair, soft voice, and unforgettable smile, Marilyn became one of the most recognizable women on earth. But behind the cameras and flashing lights was a woman whose real life was far more complicated than the image the world fell in love with. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, Marilyn grew up in instability and loneliness long before Hollywood transformed her into a global icon. Her difficult childhood left emotional scars that followed her throughout her rise to fame. Yet despite the pain she carried, she possessed a rare charisma that made people unable to look away from her. Producers saw her beauty, photographers saw perfection, and audiences saw fantasy. But very few people truly understood the woman behind the image. As Marilyn's fame exploded in the 1950s, so did the rumors surrounding her private life. She was linked to some of the most powerful and influential men of her era, including athletes, actors, writers, and political figures. Her marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller became headline news across America. At the same time, whispers about secret romances and elite Hollywood parties only added to her growing mystique. But Marilyn was far more intelligent and ambitious than the dumb blonde roles she was often forced to play on screen. Frustrated by the way Hollywood treated her, she broke away from the studio system, studied serious acting in New York, and even launched her own production company, something almost unheard of for actresses at that time. To the public, Marilyn Monroe looked like the woman who had everything. But behind the glamour was someone fighting loneliness, pressure, and emotional exhaustion in silence. Number 2. Elizabeth Taylor. During Hollywood's golden age, few women captured public attention quite like Elizabeth Taylor. With her striking violet eyes, luxurious beauty, and magnetic screen presence, she became one of the most desired and talked about actresses in the world. Audiences admired her elegance on screen, but behind the glamour was a personal life filled with passion, controversy, and relationships that constantly made headlines across Hollywood. Taylor became famous at a young age and quickly transformed from a child star into one of cinema's most powerful leading ladies. As her fame grew, so did the fascination surrounding her private life. She was known for falling deeply and passionately in love, often following her heart regardless of public opinion. In an era where actresses were expected to protect a perfect image, Elizabeth Taylor lived boldly and refused to hide her emotions from the world. One of the most controversial moments of her life came when she began a relationship with singer Eddie Fisher while he was still married to actress Debbie Reynolds, who was once considered one of Taylor's closest friends. The scandal shocked Hollywood and dominated newspapers for months. Although Taylor later admitted regret over the situation, the controversy only intensified the public obsession with her life. Over the years, Elizabeth Taylor married multiple times, including 2 marriages to legendary actor Richard Burton. Their relationship became one of Hollywood's most famous love stories, passionate, chaotic, glamorous, and impossible for the public to ignore. Together, they represented the height of celebrity romance during the 1960s, constantly surrounded by luxury, media attention, and emotional drama. But despite the endless gossip surrounding her relationships, Taylor was far more than a tabloid figure. She earned critical acclaim as an actress, won 2 Academy Awards, and became one of the most respected stars of her generation. Number 3. Marlene Dietrich. Long before Hollywood embraced individuality and rebellion, Marlene Dietrich was already living by her own rules. With her sharp cheekbones, hypnotic voice, and fearless personality, she became one of the most mysterious and influential stars of the 20th century. On screen, she projected elegance and danger at the same time. Off-screen, she lived a life surrounded by secrecy, romance, and controversy that fascinated people across the world. Born in Germany, Dietrich first rose to fame after her unforgettable performance in The Blue Angel, a film that transformed her into an international sensation almost overnight. Hollywood quickly recognized her unique appeal and brought her to America, where she crafted one of the most iconic images in entertainment history. Unlike many actresses of her era, Marlene refused to fit into traditional expectations of femininity. She wore tailored suits, embraced androgynous fashion, and carried herself with a confidence that felt decades ahead of its time. As her fame grew, so did the rumors surrounding her private life. Dietrich was linked romantically to numerous actors, writers, musicians, and socialites throughout her career. She was known for moving freely between elite Hollywood circles, European artists, and powerful political figures. Her relationships with both men and women became part of the mystery that surrounded her image, though she rarely discussed her personal life publicly. Instead, she allowed the public to speculate while she carefully maintained an aura of sophistication and secrecy. But Marlene Dietrich was more than just glamour and scandal. During World War II, she became one of Hollywood's strongest anti-Nazi voices. After becoming an American citizen, she traveled overseas to perform for Allied troops near dangerous front lines, risking her safety to support soldiers during the war. Her courage earned admiration far beyond the film industry and helped redefine her legacy. Number 4. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly is often remembered as the definition of elegance, the kind of Hollywood star who seemed almost too perfect to be real. With her soft beauty, calm presence, and effortless sophistication, she rose quickly from a promising young actress to one of the most admired women in the film industry. But behind that polished image was a life that quietly carried romance, emotional tension, and choices that would completely change her destiny. Before she became royalty, Grace Kelly was one of Hollywood's brightest leading ladies. She starred alongside some of the biggest names of her time and was known for her refined performances and natural charm. Directors admired her discipline, while audiences were drawn to her cool, mysterious beauty. Yet even in the height of her fame, Grace was not as distant from Hollywood's romantic world as her image suggested. During her film career, she was linked to several powerful and older Hollywood figures, including major co-stars whose names were already legends in the industry. Her relationships often formed quietly behind the scenes, but in the world of Hollywood, secrets rarely stay hidden for long. Each romance added another layer to the fascination surrounding her, a woman who appeared composed on screen but lived with quiet emotional complexity off-screen. Everything changed when Grace Kelly met Prince Rainier III of Monaco. What began as a glamorous Hollywood story suddenly transformed into something almost like a fairy tale. Her relationship with the prince captured global attention, blending cinema with royalty in a way the world had never seen before. The wedding that followed became one of the most publicized events of the century, watched by millions and turning her into an actual princess. But this transformation came at a cost. Grace Kelly stepped away from Hollywood at the peak of her career, leaving behind fame, scripts, and the world of film forever. Actor 5. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner was the kind of Hollywood star who didn't just appear on screen, she dominated it. With her striking beauty, bold personality, and fearless attitude, she became one of the most unforgettable women of cinema's golden age. But unlike the carefully controlled images of many studio stars, Ava lived her life with a raw honesty that often brought her into the center of romance, controversy, and public fascination. Born into a modest background, Ava Gardner's rise to fame felt almost like a Hollywood transformation story. Once discovered, she quickly became one of MGM's most talked-about actresses. Her beauty was undeniable, but what truly set her apart was her rebellious spirit. She never fully submitted to the strict expectations of the studio system, and that independence made her both admired and unpredictable in equal measure. As her career grew, so did her reputation for high-profile relationships. She was linked to some of the most powerful men in entertainment and beyond. One of her most famous relationships was with legendary singer Frank Sinatra, a connection that was passionate, intense, and constantly surrounded by media attention. Their love story became one of Hollywood's most talked-about romances, filled with emotional highs and dramatic separations. Ava's personal life was never separate from her public image. She was known for living on her own terms, refusing to hide her emotions or conform to the polished behavior expected from actresses of her time. This made her both controversial and deeply fascinating to the public. Writers, musicians, and wealthy figures were all drawn to her magnetic presence, but Ava never seemed interested in living according to anyone else's rules. Yet behind the glamour and headlines, Ava Gardner also carried emotional weight. Fame brought freedom, but it also brought loneliness and pressure. Number 6. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh was the kind of star whose presence felt almost unreal, elegant, fragile, and unforgettable in every frame she appeared in. Best known for her legendary roles in Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire, she became one of the most celebrated actresses in film history. But behind the beauty and success was a deeply emotional life marked by passion, instability, and relationships that shaped her journey both on and off screen. From the beginning, Vivien Leigh carried an ambition that set her apart. She was determined to succeed in acting, and her talent quickly brought her into the highest circles of theater and Hollywood cinema. When she met Laurence Olivier, one of the most respected actors of her time, their connection became immediate and intense. What began as admiration on stage soon turned into one of the most talked-about relationships in the acting world. Both Vivien and Olivier were already married when their bond began to grow, which created a complicated and controversial situation in their personal lives. Despite the pressure and public attention, their relationship continued, eventually leading to marriage. Together, they became a powerful theatrical couple, admired for their talent but also constantly observed for the emotional intensity of their private life. However, Vivien Leigh's life was not only defined by romance or fame. She struggled privately with severe emotional and mental health challenges, which affected both her career and relationships. At a time when such conditions were poorly understood, she often faced difficulties that the public could not see. Her brilliance on screen sometimes contrasted sharply with the inner struggles she was enduring. Even after her separation from Olivier, Vivien continued to work in film and theater, though her health and emotional stability remained fragile. Despite these challenges, she delivered some of the most powerful performances in cinema history. Number 7. Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield was one of Hollywood's most dazzling and attention-grabbing stars, a true symbol of glamour, publicity, and bold femininity in the 1950s and 60s. With her platinum blonde hair, hourglass figure, and playful screen presence, she quickly became one of the most photographed women of her era. But behind the carefully crafted public image was a life driven by ambition, constant attention, and a desire to stay in the spotlight at any cost. From the moment she entered Hollywood, Jayne Mansfield understood the power of image. She wasn't just an actress, she was a phenomenon. Studios marketed her as a blonde bombshell, often comparing her to Marilyn Monroe, but Jayne worked hard to build her own identity. She used publicity as a tool, turning interviews, appearances, and even controversies into fuel for her fame. Her career was filled with bold roles, comedy performances, and appearances that kept her name constantly in the headlines. She was also one of the early stars associated with Playboy, which amplified her fame but also shaped the way Hollywood and the public viewed her. Despite being sometimes dismissed as a manufactured star, Mansfield was far more intelligent and strategic than many people realized, carefully managing how the world saw her. In her personal life, Jayne Mansfield was surrounded by relationships, marriages, and constant media attention. Her romantic life often became part of her public story, blending her private world with her Hollywood persona. She lived in a time when female stars were both celebrated and heavily judged, yet she continued to push boundaries with confidence and charm. Tragically, her life was cut short in a sudden car accident at the age of 34. Her death shocked Hollywood and ended the life of one of its most vibrant personalities. Yet even after her passing, Jayne Mansfield's image continued to influence pop culture, fashion, and the idea of Hollywood glamour itself. Number 8. Mae West. Mae West was not just a Hollywood actress, she was a cultural force who challenged the limits of her time. Known for her sharp wit, bold confidence, and unapologetic attitude toward sexuality, she became one of the most provocative and influential figures in early cinema. Long before Hollywood fully accepted outspoken women, Mae West was already rewriting the rules in her own unique style. She began her career on stage, where her fearless personality quickly made her stand out. Unlike many performers of her era, Mae West didn't try to fit into traditional expectations. Instead, she built her identity around confidence, humor, and suggestive dialogue that pushed boundaries. When she transitioned into Hollywood films, she brought that same energy with her, turning every appearance into a statement of independence and control. Her movies were filled with clever double meanings and unforgettable one-liners that often slipped past censorship in clever ways. Lines like her famous witty remarks turned her into a sensation, but also made her controversial in the eyes of critics who felt she was too bold for mainstream entertainment. Despite this, audiences loved her personality, and she quickly became one of the highest-paid stars of her time. Behind the fame, Mae West carefully managed her career with intelligence and control. She wrote much of her own material, shaped her characters, and refused to be reduced to a typical Hollywood stereotype. In an industry dominated by male decision-makers, she stood out as a woman who understood her power and used it without hesitation. While her personal romantic life was less publicly documented compared to other stars of her era, Mae West's public image itself became a form of rebellion. She openly challenged traditional ideas about relationships, gender roles, and female behavior, making her one of the earliest icons of empowered femininity in entertainment history. Number 9. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth was one of the brightest stars of Hollywood's golden era, a woman whose beauty became legendary across the world. Often called the love goddess, she represented the perfect image of glamour during the 1940s. Her screen presence was magnetic, her dance sequences unforgettable, and her fame reached a level that few actresses ever experienced. But behind the carefully crafted Hollywood image was a life shaped by transformation, pressure, and emotional struggle. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino, Rita Hayworth's early career was built on reinvention. Hollywood studios worked heavily on reshaping her image, changing her appearance, style, and even her identity to fit the ideal screen persona of the time. Through this transformation, she became one of the most recognizable faces in cinema history, especially after her iconic performance in Gilda, which turned her into a global sensation. Her famous on-screen moments, especially her legendary dance scenes, made her a symbol of desire and elegance. But while the world saw glamour, Rita often carried the weight of intense studio pressure and personal expectations. Fame brought opportunity, but it also demanded constant perfection, leaving little space for privacy or emotional balance. Rita Hayworth's personal life was equally complex. She was married multiple times, including high-profile relationships that kept her constantly in the public eye. One of her most notable marriages was with filmmaker Orson Welles, a relationship filled with both artistic connection and emotional challenges. Despite her success, she often struggled to find stability in her private life, as fame and personal happiness rarely moved in the same direction. As she grew older, Rita's life became more difficult due to health challenges that were not fully understood at the time. Number 10. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's story is one of the most powerful and heartbreaking journeys in Hollywood history, a life defined by extraordinary talent, early fame, and emotional struggles that followed her until the very end. To the world, she was the unforgettable voice behind The Wizard of Oz, a performer whose presence on screen felt magical and deeply human at the same time. But behind that brilliance was a life shaped by pressure, control, and constant emotional exhaustion. Judy Garland entered Hollywood at a very young age, and almost immediately, she was placed under intense studio control. The industry demanded perfection from her, not just in performance, but in appearance, weight, and behavior. She was pushed through a relentless schedule, often working on multiple projects at once, while being given medication to keep up with the physical and emotional demands of stardom. What looked like success from the outside was, in reality, an exhausting cycle of pressure and expectation. Despite these challenges, Judy's talent was undeniable. Her voice carried deep emotion, and her performances connected with audiences in a way that felt genuine and raw. She became one of Hollywood's most beloved entertainers, admired for her ability to turn personal emotion into unforgettable performances. Yet, the same sensitivity that made her special also made her vulnerable in an industry that rarely protected its stars. Her personal life reflected the same emotional turbulence. Judy Garland was married multiple times, and her relationships often struggled under the weight of fame, addiction, and instability. She faced constant public attention, with her private life frequently becoming the subject of media discussion. Behind the scenes, she battled deep emotional pain and addiction issues that began during her early years in the studio system.